he's got the samba skills that to do what Palmer can do.
Levi Colwill was the master of that for Maresca last season.
The others, to their credit in a way, are trying to take more responsibility. I think it's been really harsh on him so far. Like, I don't think it's been that bad.
Chelsea host Liverpool on Saturday evening at Stamford Bridge. Two beleaguered sides as the first place team go to 8th. Both have got key players missing and huge question marks around their tactics. Well, fortunately for you and perhaps for both managers, we are here in the Tactics Exposed Team Talk studio. I'm Will Pugh, that's Sun Sports tactical guru, Dean Scoggins, and as always, Dino, we will be answering questions from our viewers. Loads of them as there are in a record-breaking week for Tactics Exposed. 2 most viewed episodes, so thank you very much to you guys. And we hit 40 million, Dino. 40 million cross-platform views since this show started. Happy days. Cause for celebration.
Yeah, 40 million, at 1/3 of Alexander Isak.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Yeah,
but great stuff. Loved the subs. Loved the comments in the views this week. Really, really great. And some recognition that I am a Tottenham fan and I'm not just blowing Arsenal's trumpet all the time.
Exactly that, mate. Yeah, but thanks very much for you guys for all the support. We hope you stay with us. Let's get straight into it though, Dino. Have a chat about that game on Saturday night. This is quite a good question to kick off with. How will Chelsea cope without Cole Palmer? Groin injury, 4 to 6 weeks out, it looks like at the moment. Getting a little bit of grief for his outfit that he turned up to Stamford Bridge in the other night.
And he was watching the under-19s before it as well. Fair play to him. That was really nice.
Exactly. Yeah. People more focused on the fact he looked like he was going to the moon, I think. But a decent question. Talk to us tactically. How do they cope without him? Because they haven't won a game in the Premier League in 2 defeats and that draw against Brentford. People asking questions about Maresca's job.
Yeah, it's really difficult with Chelsea. And I won't lie, I've really struggled. I was talking to our Chelsea supporting producer James before the show, and I've really struggled to nail down the different things that's happening with Chelsea so far this season. The Fulham game, the Brentford game, the European games. And maybe that is the problem, that they're not as sure what they're supposed to be doing or what they're trying to be doing as they were earlier. So just to remind everyone, before we move on to Cole Palmer, what Chelsea do. So we'll go straight into the board. It's Maresca ball, so it's a box in midfield, okay? So we'll move the forward line forwards just for a second, and then we have one attacking midfielder going to this position, one attacking midfielder going to this position, and then one of the fullbacks will move in.
Next.
Yeah, so let's just say that this is Caicedo, let's just say, and he moves into there, and then let's, for argument's sake, in this instance, Reece James goes in there. So we end up with, obviously, our preferred 3-2-5 shape, as all teams do, but most importantly for Maresca, we have the box in midfield. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is your rest defence. So if you're counter-attacked against, you end up with 2 players who can do that. One of them being a dual-winning fullback, and then obviously one of them being Caicedo, one of the best dual winners there is. And the other reason for that is it moves 2 attacking players into these positions here. So, on to the Cole Palmer issue, okay?
Just quickly on that as well, that can also often, what they utilise to really good effect is Marc Cucurella when he steps in and as a sort of ball player as well. Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah, correct. And fullbacks generally are good in one-to-one situations. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons they become fullbacks. They're good 1v1 against wingers. They actually work very well in tight spaces because although you might think they're out wide, they end up in tight spaces around the edges and corners of the box all the time.
They've got 180 degrees to play with when they're on the line rather than 360.
Exactly,
like
yeah. And for years, I mean, Reece James was talked about as a central midfield player when he was on loan at Wigan and places like that. He was the best player in the Championship in centre midfield when he was about 18 years old. Yeah. So he's done it historically. So that is the reason. And then obviously what you try and do is a centre forward stretches this way and goes in there. And these guys stretch this way. We'll come back to that later, which means then you have a Cole Palmer ball player who works in these areas here and another player, you know, who works in these areas here. So when Chelsea have been functioning at their best and when it's all been going well, this is Enzo Fernandez because he is the most mobile midfield player in there. Not great in 1v1 situations and maybe not the greatest footballer, but if you think that he's moving from a midfield position into an attacking position, he's the one that they move the play around. And Cole Palmer obviously will get the freedom to come into these pockets and move into those pockets there. Okay?
Just 105 million, not the greatest footballer for Enzo Fernandez.
Yeah, no, he's a very, very good player. And I should point out as well, and this is relevant to this, he's scored 9 goals in this calendar year and has had 10 assists. So that's more than any other player in the Chelsea team, including Palmer. So he shouldn't get too much criticism. And we did a whole show last year on his tactical flexibility. And I still believe that. However, without Palmer, which is what this question is about, that's where the problem lies. So what that means is you're asking a different player to do this. So maybe where the other way, you're then, what often would happen at times as well in Chelsea's formation with Enzo Fernandez is, Cucurella would be the one who goes here. So let's for argument's sake say that it wasn't Reece James who moved into midfield. It's the left back. Cucurella comes from here.
Yep.
Into that position there. Enzo Fernandez would then read that Cucurella's gone there and move here. So that shows his tactical flexibility, okay? But it's this position that's the problem. So then without Palmer, so if Palmer's not playing, you then say, well, Enzo Fernandez or Andre Santos has to move into that position on a side that they don't particularly like. And then the creativity is falling on these two players who, Santos and Enzo Fernandez, who don't really like taking the ball with their back to goal, don't like turning in these tight spaces. So
and just aren't Cole Palmer.
Yeah, and just aren't. Yeah, absolutely. He is their best player. So how do they cope, right, is the question. I would take a risk. I would say that you play Estevao there.
Correct.
And that then means that you don't have to change anything else in that box formation.
Okay.
We know that Enzo Fernandez and Cucurella can swap those positions there and do that very well and work very well together. Cucurella can sometimes go up the outside into that position, meaning that your winger can cut inside. Cucurella is very comfortable doing those 3 things in that position. And then Enzo Fernandez is very comfortable doing that. Where he's not comfortable is being the focal point of the attack, the ball into feet with his back to goal, receiving the ball in here from a direct pass and then having to turn and play 1v1. Estevao, yes, very young, very raw, but what it means is that free him up in perhaps the position he wants to play. It's loads of pressure on him, I know, in a game against Liverpool, but he's got the technical ability to do what Cole Palmer does. And often when I look at teams who have got injuries, and Chelsea have, then don't change everybody else. Just change the one player and say, right, we're going to play in the same way. We're not going to expect Estevao to do what Cole Palmer does straight away, but he might have that moment of magic that turns the game.
Yeah, and it makes sense really, because just looking at them player profile and player style wise, he's that much more mercurial and tricky and sort of mobile a la Palmer, isn't he? Than Fernandez, who's a little bit more, forgive me, but he's a little bit more sort of robust and maybe a little slightly less mobile.
And what I've noticed in the Brentford game and in the Fulham game as well, particularly those two, was that Chelsea, although, as we say, Maresca loves that shape and loves that very rigid box, as we've been talked about, without Cole Palmer, the others, to their credit in a way, are trying to take more responsibility and they're trying to play a bit more. As I say, Enzo Fernandez having to have more touches without Cole Palmer there in more forward positions. And so what's ended up happening is something like this, where they get a player close to the striker, they end up desperately trying to move around in this space, and then now look at what's happened to their box. Their box becomes completely skewed. Caicedo goes one way or the other chasing after the ball, and then he's got too much ground to cover through here. And what's happening with Chelsea at the moment is one bad decision is compounding to another bad decision, and then it's like a house of cards. And you know, in the Brentford game, Chalobah goes diving in here, he goes over to cover here. This defender here didn't know whether to stick or twist. Caicedo gets stuck, and Jordan Henderson plays this ball over the top, and they get really beaten in transition. And they were in kind of that shape there when that Brentford goal was in the build-up to that Brentford goal. And Maresca will be looking at that freeze frame going, where's my box? So if they can get the box back and then put someone in that creative position, I would say that's how they're going to try and cope without Cole Palmer.
So just quickly then, Dino, before we move on to question 2, what exactly is it about Estevao that you think makes him the ideal replacement for Palmer?
Well, one of the things is the other player that's got the skills. He's got the samba skills that to do what Palmer can do. He's the player that makes the stadium stand up when the ball goes to him. And in this position here, on that inside right, when he plays out here on the right-hand side, he wants to cut in here all the time, which narrows that space off, and you end up in this little junction here in a little bit of traffic. So give him the ball in this area here, where he can have a winger, probably Neto, going up the outside of him, and he can go this way or this way and use those ball skills. And if he loses possession in an area like this because he's doing a lovely little trick and Liverpool crowd him out, you've got Caicedo there to back him up.
Perfect. Dino, let's have a look at question number 2 then. Oh, it's an exciting game already, man. I love Estevao as well. Chelsea fans have fallen in love with him already. Can Maresca keep playing the same tactics without Levi Colwill? ACL injury out till probably the end of the season, to be fair, certainly a large majority of it. One thing was interesting in question 1 there. You talk about that direct pass from defence up to these forward players. Levi Colwill was the master of that for Maresca last season, often into Nicholas Jackson dropping deep. Those two players not available, of course, for Chelsea against Liverpool. So can he keep playing the same tactics without Levi Colwill, so talented as he was at playing those passes that are key to Maresca's system?
Yeah, it's almost as key, and producer James would say it is more key than Cole Palmer, which is, but it is that big. And he doesn't really have a replacement. I'd like to think that Tosin is a decent ball player. Chalabar's a decent ball player, but he's suspended in injuries. They're not there. Can Badiashile do what Levi Colwill does? No. Is the answer.
Did play well against Benfica, to be fair.
Absolutely, yeah. And they've got a couple of other players there. And Achimpong could play. I like the look of Hato, however you pronounce that. Before you jump in the comments, have a go at my pronunciation again. One of those two is correct.
Yeah.
So just to explain that, and look, I'm sorry, but we have to go back to that West Ham game last year where...
We don't have to, that was ages ago.
We do, because that was where the penny dropped for me watching Chelsea from how they do it brilliantly, and was also one of the reasons where I think that João Pedro and Delap have to do as well as what Nicholas Jackson was doing in build-up. I don't think we can question they'll do better than him in the penalty area, but in the build-up. So let's just explain that for everyone. What they try and do, Chelsea, is they try and get this player here or this player here free when they're playing out. So that might mean that the goalkeeper steps into the line and they create an extra player, or it means that one of the base of the box drops into a position here so that the press players can't all go. I mean, they're going to take a big risk if they're going to push another player on here and go for that. So what they try and do then is get the ball to this player and then they open up a space. So I've left this big and open intentionally. You can still see the box there, but I've left this big and open. So they'll then try and do this so that pass is on. And that pass might be to Cole Palmer, or this week Estevao playing in that position, or it might be straight into the striker. And it's Levi Colwill in that position who probably 8 times out of 10 when Chelsea are playing well and he's playing, that does that job, okay? So that is a correct question. That is a really, really big thing. And what's happened in these games, in previous games, Brentford, Fulham and the European games that I've been looking at, is teams have blocked that off. So it might be that Florian Wirtz, who works extremely hard for Liverpool, is asked in this game as the 10 to drop into that position just to screen the pass. So that if this defender or this defender have got the ball, he's going to come here to block that off. He's going to come there to block that off, okay?
£116.5 million British record seems a lot for a pass blocker.
No, but he's still got to defend, and he does work very hard. I think we're going to come on to Wirtz in a moment, but
you don't know that yet, do you?
But very good, yeah. But what's been happening in these other games is, so teams are then blocking the narrow pass, right? They're forming that, and therefore the box of Chelsea stays the same. Right. The pass that becomes available is that one.
Yep.
Is the one into the fullback, and
the wingers.
Yeah, the wingers. Or the fullback, depending on who pushes on. Fine, okay, yeah. But yeah, the wide man. Okay, yep. You're right. Mainly the wingers. And what's happened is that teams have managed to get this Chelsea back three, as it becomes narrow. And that pass becomes more and more difficult. And it's almost like a little trap. So you imagine here that this midfielder's thinking, as soon as he looks up and looks at the ball, I could get there.
Quite.
I could get there and cut that out. And we know that that player's not good enough to hit a little reverse ball in there. And also these two players are blocking off that passing lane because they know the Chelsea box.
Yeah.
It becomes predictable.
Right.
And then the same here. This player wants to play that ball there and they're going to nick it. And Brentford did it superbly. Fulham launched their counter-attacks from there. So, no, I think is the answer. He can't keep playing the same way as he does just with Colwill because Colwill's such a good ball player.
So what does he do instead, Dino?
Well, I think what he does instead, if you really caught the Chelsea fullbacks in an honest, really, really honest position, they would say they'd rather play like fullbacks than inverted midfield players.
Sorry,
okay?
hang on. Right, so if you ask the Chelsea centre-backs or the Chelsea fullbacks?
The Chelsea fullbacks. I think if you ask Reece James where he'd want to be on the field, I don't think he'd necessarily now want to be here. I think he'd want to be here.
Same for Cucurella?
Cucurella is more flexible and he's the more buzzing around player, okay?
Right.
And we know that Caicedo and Lavia is another big miss for them in this setup. But we know that Caicedo and Santos could be the base of that. Right. So if you get to a position, Fernandes is going to probably be the one who pushes on with Estevao in that position there. But we know then that these fullbacks are good enough to pivot. So if they start with a back four, let's say, Reece James goes. Cucurella's going to know I'm not going to go, so he can go back in there. That gives you a much better ball player in that position
to play this
pass,
yep.
And also to carry without Colwill very rarely carried, but if the fullback carries there's still players to cover if he loses the ball. So it's not as big a risk.
And you drag more of the opponents over earlier and then more chance of an overlap later in the move.
Exactly. So then there's the other swing the other way. So let's say Cucurella pushes on, that swings in there, the right-hand side player comes in, you get that player in there, the inside forward, maybe Garnacho comes into that position and Cucurella goes over there. You still form your 3-2-5, but you're using your fullback in a different way. So is he going to switch in this game? I'm not so sure, but that's a way of doing it to make sure you've got a very good ball player in Cucurella or Reece James in your key passing position without Colwill.
Excellent. I meant overload, by the way, not overlap. I'm just hoping AI picks up on it. We get some of their views. Right, question number 3. Dino, why on earth did Chelsea buy Alejandro Garnacho? Poor Alejandro.
Yeah, well, that is a $40 million question, isn't it?
Quite, yeah, he had a bit of a nightmare getting out Man United, of course. Bit of a prolonged one, taking a bit of a while to hit the ground running, it's fair to say, but answer the question, Dean.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend it's not a confusing one to me.
Because you haven't mentioned him once, by the way.
Yeah, well, I did, just in that last bit there. I did, in the end of that one, but only coming inside when a fullback goes up the outside, which I would imagine the person that asked this question is thinking about with that, because he's not a round the sides winger. He has the ability to go both ways, but it's like 60 to 70% of the time he comes inside.
Right.
And what was so dangerous about Chelsea last year, and sorry Chelsea fans, I'm going to mention Noni Madueke, but Noni Madueke being in this really wide position here meant that often Neto occupied this really wide position here as well. And then obviously with Cole Palmer here, and then it was Jackson last year, and then Enzo Fernandez, you open these spaces because you're maintaining the width. If you've got players who come inside all the time, you take away all that space. If Garnacho every single time is coming in here, and that I do think that's why Enzo Fernandez is struggling a little bit with the relationship as well. And look, Gittins on this side would hold the width much better, but then what's happening is they're coming in from this side, and it's like, maintain the width.
On both sides.
On both sides, because that box midfield that we keep talking about and the number 10 positions thrive on the fact that their open spaces are created by wingers being wide, because and what they want is a winger to go up the outside and here go 1v1 with a fullback and go up the outside, and then these are the guys that crash the box along with them. And often Palmer would score from the knockdown, right? Because he would hang out like Eza did last week. And so that's the frustration. But I think they've bought him because he can play both sides and it's flexibility. So he could play on the right and go up the outside. That'd be interesting. I do think that in this game, particularly with potentially Kirkez or Robertson in the Liverpool left-back position, that Neto's good defensively, so he would track back. Garnacho is not good defensively. he won't want to see that Brentford game again with where he switched off at that back post after celebrating wildly the Chelsea equaliser, then switching off at the back post going the other way. But he does give them the alternative option. And as I say, if they can get to a point where they do get the left back to be the advanced player on this side instead of the winger, then the winger comes into this position, and that's where Garnacho is more comfortable. So they've bought him because he can go both ways, and it does make them more flexible in attack. But at the moment, to me, it looks confused.
He did look well cool in his launch pictures as well, Dino, with his peroxide head, and he sold a few kits, no doubt.
You know I'm not going to comment on fashion.
I think that might be for the best. Right, question number 4, Dino. Why is Florian Wirtz not working for Liverpool yet? Now, we've discussed him a couple of times on either Tactics Exposed or Team Talk this season. Lots of Liverpool fans asking similar questions, fans up and down the country. I, for one, was so excited to see him in the Premier League, having watched him in the flesh a few times for Leverkusen. Absolute Rolls Royce of a player. But the physicality, obviously different, taking him a little bit of time to bed into that by all accounts. But he's a long-term signing. You feel he'll come good, or do you?
Look, I think it's been really harsh on him so far. Like, I don't think it's been that bad.
British record, 116 million. That's the context, isn't it?
But let's remember this is the Premier League, right? This is the Premier League. It's not, I'll rock up and, and just turn it on and go for it. And look, I'm going to read the stat off the screen there because we've set this up before. But 5 players have had 16 chance creations this year. Bruno Fernandes, 17. Brian and Burmo, 18. Jack Grealish, 21. And joint top on that list, Florian Wirtz, with 21 chances created. So is it him not performing and not working, or is it that Ekitike, Isak, Salah, whoever it is, haven't put the ball in the back of the net from that Florian Wirtz chance creation? So I think he's actually doing okay. However, there's a couple of things to really note at this stage, is that he's been coming to play as this number 10, okay? What it's meant is Salah, most games this side, Gakpo is a favourite of Arne Slot, and for a lot of good reason. And then this has been Ekitike or Isak, okay?
And just quickly, sorry, we did do the episode, didn't we, on a bit of confusion with Wirtz playing sort of as a 10, as a traditional 10, and his interlinking play with Gakpo in this situation, but the left winger?
Absolutely, yeah. And so 2 things have happened here this season for Liverpool. I'm not going to say, like, lots of people are going, oh, they're in transition. No, they won the league last year and they spent £400 million. Like, that's not transition, that's upgrading. Okay, so that I'm not having that.
That's going again.
Yeah, that's going again. And look, they've got the best forward of the last 5 years in the Premier League in Mo Salah on this side, who hasn't been actually hitting the heights yet. But that is probably to do with getting to know the relationship with the fullback. Not been playing badly. They've got probably the best double pivot in the Premier League as well, with McAllister and Gravenberch. So why is it not working? I'm not sure it's not, but I think it's because where Florian Wirtz likes to pick up the ball. So we're going to show his heat map here from where he liked to pick up the ball in the Bundesliga, okay? And all of his time at Leverkusen. And we'll see this really, really impactful red position over on this side. Yes, he goes in here. Of course he does, because he's right-footed. But where he picked up the ball, so back in here, is in this position here, okay? And where that differs is last season for Liverpool, we've got when it was Diaz up front, and then when it was Gakpo and, God rest his soul, Jota on this side, then you had this position where these two often interchanged. And that would be, can I drag a full-back in here and then take a centre-back over here and mess up that back line? They used to do that a lot, and then we'd have the crashing midfielder come through the middle, like Szoboszlai, McAllister go through there. Gravenberch scores goals from there as well. So that's what they used to do in that position. And so that's been very difficult for Gakpo and Ekitike Isak to then cope with Florian Wirtz, who's supposed to be the 10, going into those positions. So he's been given this more freedom. So if we show his then heat map of where he's been for Liverpool, you'll see there's not many red zones. It's more like yellow zones where he's picking the ball up, he's doing a lot. He's covered more ground in 5 of the 6 games than any other player as well.
That just means, just for the heat map, just means it's not as concentrated in one position. He's picking it up a lot, but across that line.
Absolutely. And in a more physical, more, aerobically challenging league that the Premier League is.
Aerobically challenging.
Yeah,
Nice
that's
little
tell
phrase
I ran
that.
a marathon
Yeah.
the other week, can't I? But that is. I actually think he's doing too much work. I think he's running too much.
A la Bruno Fernandes.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's really hard to for a manager to turn around and say, stop running. I'm not, as I say, with a Chelsea position, he's going to have a job in cutting out passes in this game. But stop getting yourself back in this position here to receive the ball. Stop doing that, because then you've got 40 yards to cover to be in the position that we want you to be in here. So what Chelsea will do is try and box him out with that midfield. They'll try and, with that box midfield, they'll try and box him out to make him go backwards. Then they're safe. Then they'll open back out again. And, that's where they want him going, that way. So Liverpool need to take a bit of a risk and get him here. Get him with the striker. And then, how does he work with Gakpo? Now, maybe it's that Gakpo is making his run later, so that he's actually running in there to be with the striker from their direct play, and Wirtz is then receiving the ball in this position here, where he loves to be, and go there. And look, maybe it's then they move on and say, well, actually, Wirtz is going to start here.
Okay.
That's another option, and it could be an option later in the game as well.
Excellent stuff, Dino. You've got to work smart and hard in the Premier League, haven't you, to be fair? Just quickly then, if it is one of those again where Arne Slot maybe, I say again, not that he's been frustrated with Wirtz before, but if he's looking at it going, it's not quite clicking, what's the sub?
I think the sub could be, what he's done, obviously Szoboszlai's been playing as the right back, which he was absolutely sensational in the Arsenal game, and obviously the free kick as well. But if he starts with Szoboszlai there, then the attacking change is to bring on Frimpong. And then he could move Szoboszlai into the 10 position here, or Curtis Jones into the 10 position here. Szoboszlai could move in for Gravenberch or McAllister if need be. And then you get Curtis Jones in here, and then you have Wirtz over here. You do lose a bit of physicality that way, and and he's a big fan of Gakpo, quite rightly. Very, very tactically flexible, and obviously very, very dangerous as well. With Ekitike being injured this week and being a doubt for the game, then it's likely that Gakpo could be the option if Isak's not working to go up there, which means you can move Wirtz into that position. So, playing Szoboszlai as a right back does give you a lot of options going the other way as a sub.
Yeah, absolutely, Dino. Look, don't forget as well with Betfair's Safe Sub, your bet is not over yet. It rolls on to the player coming on if the player you have backed has gone off. So if you've had Florian Wirtz to score at any time, Arne Slot hauls him off because it's not quite working, and he brings on, say, Curtis Jones, and he then scores, you still get paid out. Dino, I can't wait for this one. I say it every week. I'm getting a load of grief about calling these games barnstormers all the time. So I've been desperately thinking of another word, but I haven't bought my thesaurus. But it's going to be an absolute humdinger. What about that?
Yeah, humdinger's good. Yeah, look, and Saturday night 5:30 kickoff.
Great slot.
They feel like that's the slot. And the Chelsea-Man United game really delivered, or Man United-Chelsea game really delivered 2 weeks ago. Let's hope Chelsea deliver again. Maybe they can keep 11 men on the field, which is something we haven't mentioned as well. But I think that's kind of down to their house of cards thing I talked about, where if one thing goes wrong, they start diving in, and that's where the red cards come from. So keep the box shape, Chelsea. Keep the box.